Welcome to the Needle and Notion Mysteries, a cozy crime series for sewists, crafters, and lovers of handmade intrigue. I'm your host, Nathalie, and in this podcast, I'll be reading aloud from my original mystery novels featuring Snow Hiver, a former criminal psychologist turned reluctant detective and home sewist and sewing blogger who solves crimes with a sharp eye, a sharper wit, and a sewing machine by her side. This is Book 1, The Hemline Homicides, a tale of fashion feuds, pattern theft, and a murder stitched into the seams of small-town life. So whether you're sewing, cutting fabric, or just taking a creative break, these chapters are perfect listening for when your hands are busy and your mind needs a story. New chapters release regularly right here on my channel, where you can also explore sewing patterns, creative tutorials, and more handcrafted storytelling. The Hemline Homicides, a Needle and Notion Mystery, Book 1. When reclusive sewing blogger and former criminal psychologist Snow Hiver stumbles upon the body of a fashion influencer, strangled with thick upholstery thread and eerily posed like a dressmaker's mannequin, her quiet new life in the coastal town of Buttonhole Bay unravels faster than a faulty hem. Snow thought she'd left crime scenes and forensic profiling behind. Now with her loyal greyhound, Shadow, at her side, and her instincts sharper than her dressmaking scissors, she's reluctantly pulled into a case filled with stolen designs, petty rivalries, and secrets stitched into every seam. As she dodges small-town gossip and rising police suspicion, Snow must use her wit, her wardrobe, and her very particular understanding of human behavior to uncover the killer hiding in plain sight. This story is perfect for fans of the Thursday Murder Club, sewing-themed mysteries, and cozy whodunits with a psychological twist. This is a murder Snow will need more than a seam ripper to solve. The Hemline Homicides, Chapter 1, Patterned to Kill. Snow Hiver hadn't planned on being the main character in a murder investigation again. She had planned on selling 3 custom waistcoat patterns, sipping a lukewarm Americano, and escaping without speaking to more than 5 people. But life, as always, had other intentions. She stood just inside the Buttonhole Bay Community Hall, holding a canvas tote full of fabric in one hand and the leash of her sleek greyhound in the other. Shadow, her black-furred companion, leaned lightly against her hip, looking about as enthusiastic as she felt. His tail curled low between his legs, his ears half raised in distaste at the echoing noise inside the hall. "I know," she murmured to him. "It's already too loud, and we haven't even seen the influencer horde yet." The scent of dust, citrus wood polish, and warm thread greeted her like a polite stranger. Tables were being set up, mannequins positioned, steam irons hissed in the distance. The Festival of Threads had returned after a 2-year hiatus, and the town's craft community had turned out in full force. Snow squinted at her assigned vendor table in the side alcove, tucked between a booth selling hand-dyed yarn and a grandmother aggressively hanging up felt puppets. "Perfect," she muttered. "The corner of sewing for the overlooked." She walked over and set down her tote bag, gave Shadow's side a quick reassuring rub, and began unpacking her wares. vintage-style garment samples, envelopes of sewing patterns she had designed and printed herself, and her small wooden display sign that read, Needle and Notion Studio. She hadn't bothered to update the logo in years. Her moment of peace was short-lived. "You're in my spot," said a voice like over-perfumed fabric softener. Snow turned to see Vera Valen, fashion influencer, small-town celebrity, and human Pinterest board, tottering toward her on absurdly high heels that clicked against the parquet flooring like stilettos in the courtroom. "Hello, Vera," Snow said evenly. "This is the east alcove. You requested west-facing light, remember?" Vera pushed her oversized sunglasses onto her head and waved a piece of paper in the air. "I know what I asked for. I changed my mind. That table makes me look sallow. Besides, your thing is in the way." Snow looked at her, then looked at Shadow, who had laid down beside the table and was pretending this entire interaction wasn't happening. "My thing is my dog," she said. "He's legally allowed to be here, unlike your 600-watt ring light that you're about to blind everyone with." Vera made a dramatic sigh and rolled her eyes so far back, Snow briefly wondered if she might be possessed. "Honestly, I don't understand why you're even here. You haven't posted in ages. Are you trying to stage a comeback? Because it's giving desperate nostalgia," Vera snapped. Snow paused, placed a stack of patterns carefully on the table, and stood up straight. Today she was wearing her sharp grey waistcoat and pressed black trousers, her emotional armor, and the dark circles under her eyes hadn't been photoshopped for the occasion. "I'm here to sell sewing patterns, Vera, not throw digital tantrums for likes." Vera's smile was pure venom. "Just don't accuse me of stealing your designs again. People might start thinking you're paranoid." Snow let the words hang in the air for a moment. She felt Shadow's head lift beside her, his lean body tense. Her fingers instinctively reached down to scratch behind his ears, grounding herself in his familiar warmth. "I don't accuse," she said coolly, eyes narrowing. "I simply asked why your sunset bloom wrap dress looked an awful lot like the marigold wrap dress I debuted at last year's Stitch and Sip retreat." Vera laughed loud and theatrical. "Wrap dresses existed before either of us picked up a needle, darling. You didn't invent the bias cut." "No," Snow said, folding her arms. "But I did draft a waist tie loop technique with a diagonal casing and triple top stitching. The same one that mysteriously appeared on your blog, down to the color palette and hem finish." Vera stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Snow could hear. "Look, I know you think just because you disappeared for a couple of years, you've returned as some kind of wounded genius. But this world moves fast, sweetheart. If you can't keep up, don't blame the rest of us for stitching faster." Snow didn't flinch. "There's fast," she said, "and then there's plagiarism." "Big word for someone hawking waistcoats and home-printed pattern envelopes," Vera hissed. "Your comeback blog post got what? 12 comments? And 2 of them were your aunt." Shadow gave a low rumble in the chest. "Careful, Vera," Snow murmured. "He can smell insecurity." Vera looked down at the dog, then back at Snow, her composure slipping for just a moment. "Fine. Keep your flea-bitten corner of the festival. I have an audience to inspire." As if on cue, the festival coordinator Meryl An eternally overworked woman wearing a badge that read, "Creative Flow, not Chaos," rushed over between them. "Ladies, please, let's not spill blood before the opening speech," she said, half joking. "Vera, your setup is over by the ivy-covered windows, remember? Great natural light." Vera flicked her ponytail over her shoulder and stomped off, stilettos clacking and muttering something about amateur hour and tragic waistcoats. Snow let out a slow breath and crouched beside Shadow. "I know," she whispered. "She's the human embodiment of a hot glue gun burn." Shadow gave a small chuff of agreement and rested his long head on her knee. They finished setting up just as the doors opened and the flood of attendees began. For the rest of the day, Snow smiled politely, handed out a few samples, and tried not to let the social stimulation scrape too hard on her nerves. The day blurred into pastel patterns and awkward conversations, until sometime just before noon, when the electricity in the air shifted. It was Shadow who noticed first. He stood up abruptly, ears perked, body rigid. "What is it?" Snow followed his gaze to the other side of the hall, where a crowd was gathering near the back corridor that led to the storerooms. Meryl came running through the crowd, her face pale, her organizer badge askew. "Call the police!" she gasped. "Something's happened!" Snow didn't move, not at first. But her instincts, those dormant muscles from the past she tried so hard to shed, snapped to life with frightening clarity. She gave Shadow's leash a tug. "Come," she said quietly. They walked briskly past booths, ignoring the murmurings, the gasps, and the confused chatter. Snow ducked under the caution tape Meryl had just begun to string up with trembling hands. The corridor was dim and cold. The overhead fluorescence flickered like a skipped stitch. And there, posed stiffly in the shadows, half-seated against the base of a portable dressmaker's display, was Vera Vallon, dead. Her back arched unnaturally, shoulders squared like a mannequin in a store window. Her neck bore a deep red line, raw and deliberate, thin but unmistakable. Thread. Thick, waxed upholstery thread, wound twice with surgical precision around her throat. Her head lolled just slightly to one side, platinum ponytail falling in a perfect arc like someone had arranged it. Her arms were propped delicately at her sides. One gloved hand still clutched a promotional flyer. On a display behind her, the sequined mock-up of a 1950s cocktail dress shimmered under the buzzing light. Snow's eyes flickered over the scene and froze. In the victim's hand, one of her own pattern labels, the words "Needle and Notion Studio" clearly printed. Snow blinked once, then whispered to Shadow, "Oh, hell."